What's up, guys? Eli here. I am here for a really cool kind of special video today. One that I've been planning on for a long time, and just kind of I felt like it was kind of a daunting task, so I've been avoiding it. But finally, I got it done. Not that I put that much work into it, but we're going to be talking about Lovecraftian movies, specifically ones that are in my collection. I kind of took a little bit of inventory, and it turns out that I have quite a few. So yeah, Lovecraftian movies. I don't really like the term necessarily, but basically, what that means, in case you're unaware, is movies that are either adaptations of H.P. Lovecraft's short stories, or movies that many people have pretty much feel like are very much inspired by Lovecraft's writing. I'm sure you know who H.P. Lovecraft is. If you don't, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about who he was. He was basically a pulp kind of sci-fi horror writer in the early 1900s. His writing dates back to around 1917. That's not when he was most prolific by any means. He died in 1937, so I think most of his writing was in the 20s and 30s. I'm a big fan. I know he's a controversial character. I'm not going to get into that either. I'm a big fan of his writing. I got into his work about probably around 10 years ago, so I was a little bit late to the party. To be honest, I'd always known the name, and I just figured like his, the era that he existed in. I don't read literature from that time period, so I just always figured like it's going to go way over my head. It's going to be, it's going to be really dated and boring. And honestly, yeah, I couldn't have been more wrong. I find his writing great. It doesn't feel dated. Usually, I just absolutely love it. He is literally my favorite author of all time. If you are unfamiliar with his writing, you can find his like compilation books pretty easily. You can go to any bookstore, especially if they like a used bookstore, and you can find them really cheap. He wrote a bunch of stories, and they're all they're pulp. They were pulp stories, so they're short stories. You can find compilations all over the place, ranging from really cheap and inexpensive to like paperbacks, or you can get if you want to spend money, you can get hard. There's really nice like compilation hardcover books, and I usually opt for these the Del Rey paperback compilations. You can get stuff like this. They all have his short stories kind of divided into usually into eras and stuff like that. Like you can get some that are his really early work, and anyways, yeah, you can find stuff like that really cheap for anywhere from $5 to $10. So basically, what I did is I took all the Lovecraftian movies in my collection, and I view them as kind of like three categories. One would be movies that are, and I usually have a problem with this category because sometimes I feel like people are reaching when they try to say these are Lovecraftian. But that category would be like movies that you feel like could be Lovecraft stories. And you watch them and you just get a feeling like, I bet you this director was totally this is totally an ode to Lovecraft. I bet you. But like I said, sometimes it's reaching because Lovecraft's style, he he has such an influence on modern modern filmmaking and writing and stuff like that. You could attribute a lot of stories and movies and stuff to his writing. So that's the first one. The second one would be movies that are definitely Lovecraft inspired, even to the point where the writer or the director or whatever has actually stated that this is Lovecraft inspired, and sometimes will even use like actual Lovecraft references in the movie, yet they aren't adaptations of any of Lovecraft's stories. So the third one would be just that, would be actual adaptations of Lovecraft stories, whether or not they are really true to the source material, or kind of derivative. But anyways, those are the three categories that I like to think of when I go into Lovecraftian movies. So we're going to start off with the first category, which would be the movies that many people consider to be Lovecraft inspired. Like I said, I feel like sometimes these are reaching, and I'm gonna start off with the monster movies, because I feel like a lot of these are kind of like kind of straddling in the middle between reaching and, yeah, I could see that. Like I said, you could do a lot of reaching. You could say Godzilla is Lovecraftian. I mean, you could easily picture Godzilla being a character out of Lovecraft's mythos. Godzilla, he's kind of similar to Cthulhu. I mean, but yet I don't feel like Godzilla is a Lovecraftian character or a Lovecraftian movie by any means. But anyways, enough of that. So I'm going to start off with this one. I could see this one being kind of a reach, but I could also picture this being, a Lovecraft-inspired movie. We're going to start off with Cloverfield. I really like this movie. I know it's found footage. I'm not a huge found footage fan, yet there are some really good found footage movies. The reason that I would consider this maybe a little bit reaching is the fact that Lovecraft's monsters in his mythos, his monsters, they weren't just monsters. As far as like the big monsters, they usually involve some sort of some sort of like they had like supernatural abilities. Basically, they weren't just like big lumbering beasts. That's not really what Lovecraft did, and that's there. In Cloverfield, this is pretty much a modern day Godzilla movie. I don't know, but when I look at the monster in this movie, he definitely screams Lovecraft to me. Yet, there isn't really anything supernatural about him. He is just literally a monster that came out of I think he came out of the ocean, if I remember correctly. Which is another thing that is kind of Lovecraftian. Is a lot of his monsters are. Like Cthulhu lives in the ocean, so a lot of his monsters are, aquatic based. So I see Cloverfield as one that kind of straddles the line between, yeah, I could see that being kind of Lovecraftian inspired, or, dude, you're kind of reaching a little bit too much. So, and this next one is kind of like that too. This is kind of, I could really see this one being inspired from like stories like The Color Out of Space. So we're talking about monsters. Really good movie. This is a very underrated movie, I think. I've only ever really seen it mentioned one time. But if you dig deep enough in like horror movie articles and stuff like that, you will see this mentioned from time to time. I consider this kind of reaching because there isn't really anything supernatural about this. It's literally just what was it? Meteors. Yeah, a meteor crashed onto Earth, and pretty much the ground that it hit, it just started kind of spreading an infection, basically an alien infection. So everything that kind of surrounded that area started to turn into like alien plants and stuff like that from whatever planet it came from. There are aliens in this who do look very kind of Lovecraftian-esque. They're big. They're almost like big, giant flying squids. So they do look quite Cthulhu-esque. But again, there is nothing supernatural about this. It's more just like an alien movie. You can almost picture it more grounded in reality than Lovecraft stories, which are very fantastical and supernatural. So. Monsters, really good movie, but yeah, it's kind of a reach calling it a Lovecraftian movie. It's kind of up to you. This next one I feel like is definitely a reach. This is one that comes up all the time when it comes to like top Lovecraftian movies. It is a great movie, one of the best movies of all time, and one of my favorites. But I do think it's reaching just a little much when it comes to considering it like a Lovecraftian. Sure, it might have been inspired by some of Lovecraft's writing, but I don't know. I couldn't even tell you for sure. But anyways, we're talking about Alien. Fantastic movie, but yet again, this is more this movie is more based. I don't want to say based in reality, but based on something that could actually happen. Um, you're cruising around space, and yeah, who's to say you couldn't encounter an alien species that is pretty much bent on destruction. Um, yeah. I mean, yes, it's a kind of a cosmic horror. Yeah, and when I say cosmic horror, I mean a horror movie that takes place in space. Um, it's a terrifying movie. It has the space and the horror and the sci-fi and everything. But other than that, uh, again, there's nothing supernatural about it. So I mean, I feel like it kind of you have to have the supernatural element to really be something that I considered, that I would consider Lovecraftian. Um, so yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. I kind of see both sides. It does kind of have a Lovecraftian feeling of dread as that, but it doesn't have the supernatural elements that the Lovecraft used in almost all of his writing. This one I don't usually see this movie listed because I mean you can look up online like lists of Lovecraftian movies. You'll find dozens of them, and they're kind of fun to comb through. I feel like I usually don't see this one on there, if maybe never. But I feel like this one is definitely Lovecraft inspired. I don't know if that was the intention, because this was directed by the great what's his name? uh, Written and directed by James Gunn. I'm a big James Gunn fan, and I definitely feel like this is his best work. We're talking about Slither. Now, the reason I consider this, kind of Lovecraft inspired is that there's a lot in this movie that's very unexplained. It's basically, this is kind of like yet another movie that, maybe inspired from The Color Out of Space. I feel like that story inspired a lot of movies and a lot of short stories. Um, I feel like this definitely could be inspired from that. The the monsters in this, they even call one of them, I think he's called the Ancient One or something like that. So I mean, I feel like basically, yeah, to me, there's definitely some Lovecraft influences going on here. Like I said, they don't go. They keep this movie keeps a lot of mystery. It's not a movie that gives you everything. It leaves a lot to the imagination. But yeah, just due to the monsters in this movie, I definitely feel like it's got to be Lovecraft inspired for me. And it's just a great movie. One of my all time favorites. This one, I think also could probably be taken maybe a little bit from Color Out of Space. This was also taken from a short story that was written by Stephen King. Stephen King is a huge Lovecraft fan. Stephen King has referenced Lovecraft so many times in his writing. In fact, Stephen King has a book called The Tommyknockers, and it is literally almost a ripoff of A Color Out of Space. Yet it is very good. It's a really fucking good book. I think it's even as good as a lot of stuff that Lovecraft did. I always felt like that was kind of Stephen King's love letter to Lovecraft. But yeah, he references Lovecraft stuff in his writing pretty frequently. So yeah, we're going to talk about The Mist. This could very well be easily be taken from a Lovecraft story. Like I said, it does kind of remind me of A Color Out of Space. If you haven't seen it, it's basically about this small town that just suddenly out of nowhere just starts getting surrounded by this mysterious fog. In the fog, or out of the fog, I should say, comes some crazy, horrifying monsters. Some of them some of them look very much like something you would see in a Lovecraft story. And then it turns out that it is pretty much like yeah, and the story itself seems very Lovecraftian too. It's basically like the military created this technology where you could like peek into other realms. So I think maybe the multiverse theory, or not multiverse, but I mean, it doesn't go in a lot of detail, but basically you can peek into other worlds, I guess, and while they were peeking into other worlds, monsters from those worlds started coming into to our reality. So it's a pretty terrifying movie, to be honest. And like, if you haven't seen it, you might have even heard just about the ending. I mean, it says right here in the box. I mean, this movie has the craziest ending to any movie I've ever seen. Fantastic movie. Ending is so bleak. It's gonna leave you feeling some shit. We'll put it that way. And last but not least, in the monsters category, I have, and this one maybe a little bit more Lovecraft inspired than it would seem. This is a newer movie. I think came out last year. I just recently bought it and just recently watched it for the first time. We're talking about Underwater. This movie is pretty much about a underwater mining crew. They're mining or drilling. I don't know if they're not mining, but they're underwater drilling crew. They're literally like at the as far down in the ocean as humanity's ever been. They're drilling and they end up waking up some kind of species of monster that they never really tell you much about them, but I don't want to spoil it, but one of the monsters turns out to actually be Cthulhu. Which I thought was a little bit weird. I don't know. It was a cool nod. He looks pretty good at first, but then when you start to see more, I don't think he looks that great. The initial scene where he appears, yeah, it looks really badass, but then he like fully comes up out of the, out of wherever he was hiding from, and doesn't look that great. But anyways, from what I heard, the director initially, and I don't know if this is true, but initially wasn't calling the monster Cthulhu, and from what I heard, he only changed his name to Cthulhu like I don't know, way later down the lines. I don't know, whatever. He does look like Cthulhu, and yeah, whatever. It's cool, just the fact that there's a monster or a movie with Cthulhu in it. Pretty sweet, I guess. So, anyways, we're gonna move on to the next. Well, I think we're gonna pretty much be in the same category. These are movies, yeah. These are more movies that are many people consider to be Lovecraft inspired. Like I said, sometimes it's kind of reaching, sometimes not. This one right here, I would not call this reaching. I think this is a definite love letter to, to Lovecraft's writing, among other things, among other movies like maybe Hellraiser and The Thing. But yeah, we're talking about The Void. This is probably one of the cooler horror movies I've seen in recent years. Actually, this movie is full of practical effects. I mean, yeah, there is CGI, but these guys definitely focus on practical effects first, and they kind of just use CGI to fill in the blanks where they couldn't do it with practical effects. I mean, you definitely have to give a lot of credit to these guys for that, because I mean, that's just not something that's done that often these days. Practical effects take a lot more work, and typically I imagine they're a lot more expensive just because of the time you have to put into it. And yeah, but this is a really cool movie. It's just basically about it doesn't really ever explain too much of what's going on, which is very Lovecraftian. There's so much left to the imagination. Like there's this kind of like mysterious cult. There is that's basically the cornerstone is this very mysterious cult. And then yeah, I don't really want to spoil it for you, but definitely check this one out. This is Lovecraftian to its core. I mean, look at the cover. I mean, you already know. You don't even need to really question it. This one I could really go either way. I could totally see this being based off of some of Lovecraft's writing, or you could say I wouldn't be surprised at all if the writer of the movie was like, yeah, I've never even read Lovecraft, but if you like Lovecraft's writing, you like that feeling of just total dread, I mean, this would be a good movie for you to watch. Got The Last Winter. It's kind of a complex movie, so I'm not really going to go into detail. It was never my intention to go into a lot of detail about any of these. Just kind of wanted to briefly talk about them. But this is a very freaky, apocalyptic type movie. Just yeah, I mean, just the fact that it's I mean, even just the scenery. Movie takes place in northern Alaska. It's just almost dark and snowy and just desolate all the time, combined with the subject matter. I mean, it's a pretty freaky movie. So definitely look into The Last Winter. This next one is yet another movie that is, to me, is just almost blatantly taken from A Color Out of Space. We're talking about Annihilation. I really enjoyed this movie. I watched this probably a year ago or so. It came out in 2018. Yeah, almost to me, almost directly inspired from A Color Out of Space. It's basically just about this mysterious area found by the military where basically, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to really do it justice by trying to talk about it, but yeah, just picture A Color Out of Space and go check it out. Very cool movie, Annihilation. This one right here, a lot of people call this, Lovecraftian in their opinion. I think this one is a little bit of a reach. I could see it. I could see it going both ways. I mean, yes, it does. It is very much cosmic horror and supernatural, and yeah, Hellraiser. I wouldn't be surprised if Clive Barker was a big Lovecraft fan. I wouldn't be shocked at all. I also don't really need to talk about Hellraiser. I mean, you've already probably seen it, so I don't know. What do you think? Lovecraftian? No, like I said, I could see it going either way. This movie right here has been many people, even people in the film industry, have called this the most Lovecraftian movie ever made, which is saying a lot because it is not an adaptation of any sort. This is just an original story by John Carpenter. Yep, you guessed it, The Thing. I would totally agree. This movie is completely Lovecraftian. I would like to watch an interview with John Carpenter, actually, to see what he says about that. I don't know. I've watched many interviews with John Carpenter. I don't know if he's a Lovecraft fan necessarily, or if he's ever taken any inspiration. My guess would be yes, because there are numerous movies that he's done that have a Lovecraftian feel. This movie is just 100% full of dread. It's got the monsters, the gross tentacly monsters, and I mean, this has everything a Lovecraft fan would want in a movie. If you haven't seen it, I don't even know what to tell you. I'd be shocked, but definitely check it out if you haven't. I mean, I feel weird even having to say that, but yeah. David Cronenberg, gotta be a Lovecraft fan, right? I would assume, but I don't know. Videodrome. To me, very Lovecraftian. This has everything from the dread to the unexplained supernatural aspects, to the disturbing visuals. Everything a Lovecraft fan would want in a movie that isn't like a monster movie or anything like that. This movie is, what's scary about this movie is that it is something so unexplained and so beyond, what the mind could really comprehend. And it's stuff like that is truly terrifying. I mean, yeah, gross tentacly monsters and ancient gods and stuff like that. Those are scary, but when it's something that is unexplained, so so terrifying that there's no explanation for it. That's what really gets you, I guess. This one right here, I think I've watched this a handful of times. In fact, I watched it recently. Some people say this is gotta be a blatant Lovecraftian movie. I, I, I guess. I mean, I could see this being a Lovecraft story. Sure. The main character is a scientist, so that kind of gives you like a reanimator feel. There's been numerous Lovecraft stories where the main character is kind of like a brilliant mad scientist. This guy's not really a mad scientist. He's a scientist that kind of likes to push the boundaries and experiments with with a lot of things, particularly drugs in this movie. But yeah, altered states. It's a weird movie. I mean, it's not the most terrifying movie you've ever seen, but it's it's got a sci-fi horror thing going on, and it's definitely worth watching. Definitely check that one out. How do you guys feel? You Lovecraftian? Like I said, I feel like I see the argument. If you want to make an argument for it being Lovecraftian, I see it. I also feel like it's reaching a little bit more than some, definitely more than this one. So I have done a lot of reading on this movie, as a lot of people have. It's a great movie. It came out. It's a recent one. Came out in 2019 or 2020, one of the two. So from what I have read, the director of this movie, Robert Eggers, so I think you know what we're talking about, I guess he has totally denied this being Lovecraft related. And from what I've read, he finds it kind of annoying when people try to make those connections. But having seen the movie, I mean, this to me is almost as Lovecraftian as it gets. So we're talking about the Lighthouse. I mean, come on. If he wants to deny any kind of Lovecraft influence, that's fine, because like I said, there's Lovecraft covered so much territory in sci-fi and horror, and he covered so much fucking ground that it's easy for something else to pop up years later and be something kind of similar to what Lovecraft did. But anyways, I'm not saying this is similar to anything Lovecraft did, but I mean, this movie has the claustrophobic feeling. It's got the unknown dread. I mean, this movie is just full of impending doom and dread, and it's one of those movies where what's so Lovecraftian about it to me is that it's not what you see that's terrifying. It's what you don't see and what you don't understand. That is terrifying. It also has touches on the concepts of of sanity, which is another Lovecraftian topic. Slipping further into insanity and not being able to control it. Yeah, definitely watch The Lighthouse. One of the better movies in recent years, to say the least. Now, this next three is considered a trilogy. I don't know if it's considered a trilogy by the director himself. I can't remember, but it's considered a trilogy at least by the fans. But, I mean, a trilogy in that they're loosely connected. So we're talking about Beyond, City of the Living Dead, and House by the Cemetery. Yeah, I could definitely see the argument for these being Lovecraftian, especially, well, all of them really. I think especially City of the Living Dead. Yeah, I mean these are all classic Italian movies directed by Lucio Fulci. I think City of the Living Dead is my favorite, but yeah, I'm not going to go into detail about these. It's either you've seen them or you haven't. And even the Beyond I could definitely see being a Lovecraft story, but still, like I said, Lovecraft, he covered so much ground in the sci-fi and horror genres and he was just the godfather of so many concepts and stuff like that. I don't see these three being obviously Lovecraft inspired. But if Fulci were to say, yeah, I was totally inspired by Lovecraft for those movies, then I'd be like, okay, no surprise there. But anyways, yeah, these are three very much considered to be Lovecraftian by a lot of people. But like I said, I see it being a potential potentially reaching a little bit far. This next one, yeah, one of my favorite movies of recent times. It was the debut, directorial debut of Panos Cosmatos, who would be he would later on do Mandy and get a lot of attention for it. Yeah, Beyond the Black Rainbow. Definitely a Lovecraftian vibe going on here, especially in the sci-fi horror realm. Yeah, definitely check this one out. Yeah, I mean, it's got Lovecraftian vibes to me, but again, it's another movie where it could be considered reaching a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. I like Cosmos Panatos a lot. I've never read any interviews with him or watched any interviews or anything like that. But yeah, for me, I'm definitely getting Lovecraftian vibes. But am I reaching for him? I don't know. It's like I said, a lot of these movies just kind of sit right in the middle where it's like yes, no, maybe, yeah. And the last in that category, we got Jacob's Ladder. Really, really good movie. I love this one. I also have it on VHS. It's Jacob's Ladder. The Lovecraftian vibes I'm getting from this one are pretty much the fear of the unknown, the supernatural vibes, and the subject of mental health. Slipping further and further into insanity. And not even really being aware of it, which is usually how it works, which is why it's so scary. And yeah, I definitely, anyway, I see this one kind of sitting in the middle, but I get Lovecraftian vibes from it. Being a big Lovecraft fan and having read, well, all of his work, yeah, I get Lovecraft vibes from Jacob's Ladder for sure. So that's all we got for that category. I hadn't really decided if I was going to split this up into multiple sections. I think I probably should, because I still have a lot of movies to talk about, and we're already into 30 minutes. So, yeah, I think we're going to call it a day. Look forward to the next videos because they're going to go more and more into Lovecraft-inspired territory. Like I said, the ones that I just showed, those are all movies that are just considered to be Lovecraft-inspired. Most of them haven't been. Most of that hasn't been confirmed, by the writers and directors and stuff like that. And like I said, sometimes it's a little bit reaching. Sometimes it's a stretch calling them Lovecraftian. Sometimes not. That's what makes it kind of cool. Cool subject matter. So, anyways, feel free to chime in if you're a big Lovecraft fan. Let me know what you think. Do you think any of these are blatant Lovecraftian movies? Do you think it's way too much of a reach to even waste your time, talking about that? And yeah, I think this what's cool about these next few videos that I'm going to do on this topic is, I can help you do a lot of legwork because, like I said, I've gone through many lists online of Lovecraftian movies. So I've done a lot of sifting through, and I've spent a lot of hours, and I've spent a lot of hours watching these, collecting these, and stuff like that. So I mean, this could help you do a little bit of legwork if you're a Lovecraft fan, if you're a newer Lovecraft fan, or if you're just trying to find more movies that kind of scratch that Lovecraftian itch. Because I know I've got it bad. So, anyways, that's all I got. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Louis says hello. He's right there, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.